Okay, it's 7:33 p.m. We're going to call this regular meeting of the Rutherford Board of Education to order. At this time, we'll ask you to please stand if you can, face the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Kelly, I'll ask you to please take roll.
Mrs. Ahmed,
Present.
Mr. Bogosian,
Present.
Mr. Conti,
Present.
Mr. Healy,
Here.
Mrs. Jones,
Present.
Mr. Mazzone,
Here.
Dr. Racine,
Here.
Mr. Sprayberry,
Present.
Dr. Awadi.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meeting of public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the Rutherford Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place posted on the bulletin board outside the Borough Clerk's office, mailed to the Herald, South Bergenite, and the Record newspapers, and filed with the Borough Clerk. Hard copies of the agenda are available in the meeting room, and the agenda is posted electronically on Friday before the meeting date on the district's website at www.rutherfordschools.org. Subsequent to the meeting, a video of the meeting will be uploaded to the district's website, www.rutherfordschools.org. The video link can be found by opening the Board of Education link and clicking on Public Meetings and then Videos. All right, board members, in your board packets, there are two sets of minutes we have to approve. One is the regular meeting of October 4th, 2021, and executive session minutes as well for October 4th, 2021. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll ask Mr. Kelly to please enter those. So we are going to start with a special presentation and update about our facility projects from Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I apologize. We can't get the video working, but this is mainly me talking anyway. The status of the building project. The PowerPoint slide starts with a slide that details the contract value for each of the projects for a total of almost $31 million. So this is, as you know, this is a sizable.
Hey Joe, it's hard to hear you.
Right.
Yeah, I can't. Is that better?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Okay, so we start with the total contract value of the building projects. This hasn't changed from what we've reviewed before. You're all familiar with those numbers. Going through the projects, we've had a number of challenges that have been relatively consistent between each of the projects. We've had material shortages, and these are not just us. This is system-wide and around the country. We've had labor shortages, particularly when it comes to masons. We've had price increases. We've had unforeseen asbestos abatement. Of course, weather conditions and other unforeseen conditions. We start with the Pierpont new addition and the renovation of the multipurpose room that was awarded last summer. Right now, phase one is essentially complete. Phase one being the gymnasium, the construction of the new gymnasium. Currently, the contractors are still there. They're doing some punch list items. They're finishing the stage floor, installing the touchpad, which controls the basketball nets and the stage lighting. They're installing wall pads, and there were some shutters outdoors. So it's 99% of the way there. It's just some last-minute items that they're working on now.
Mr. Kelly, they're over there tonight. I saw them.
They're over there tonight.
Tonight.
Yeah, they've been very good. We've been very pleased with Bismarck. So right now, phase one has come in on time essentially, and within budget. There was a allowance for change orders of $250,000. That has been spent, so we're going to need to supplement that. Phase two of the Pierpont project is the construction of the new wing where the old gym used to be. As you certainly know, the old gym has been demolished. The footings and the foundation there are complete, so they are ahead of schedule. Looking for planned completion by July 29th of next summer. And phase 3 is the renovation of the multipurpose room, and that will take place starting toward the end of the school year and into next summer. At that point, Pierpont will be complete. The Union Gymnasium and renovations. This was awarded last October, just a year ago, to H&S Construction. As we have discussed, and we've discussed in committee, virtually every deadline that has been established for this project has fallen by the wayside. So we struggle to keep these people on track. And we have a meeting with them this week to discuss further and to see how we get there. The gym is behind schedule. I'm not clear on the estimated date of completion at this point. We are looking at the science room renovation to take place next summer. The good news there is that the floor has been replaced. The concrete slab there has been replaced, and the asbestos abatement has been taken care of there. So we're a couple steps ahead in that project, but that will be done next summer. The columns are done, including the landing has been done relatively recently, but it leaves us with the gym addition. We're having problems, particularly with the roofing, but like I said, we're meeting with them this week. We'll be talking about it and coming to a solution. In the meantime, the contractors are working inside, working on bathrooms, working on plumbing, working on rough-ins, that sort of thing. So there is work happening right now. Over at the high school, with the Mortimer Wing renovation, they're essentially done for the summer. We had some close calls this summer, touch and go with the chiller, as you know, but that did get taken care of. We got it installed. What had happened was that it was installed at the very end of August, and within 2 days it had the drives that run it had both been fried. Whether or not it had to do with that storm, the Hurricane Ida on September 1st, we're still not clear at this point, but we continue to look into that. But now those drives have been replaced. The chiller is up and running. The contractor is still in the school, just doing some testing and balancing of the univents in the system throughout, which is par for the course, and that is expected to be completed shortly. Beyond that, next summer is we'll complete the Mortimer Wing renovations, and those are the window walls. You haven't seen a whole lot of work happening there because it's all internal. It's all HVAC work and asbestos abatement. But next summer will be the windows facing out onto Mortimer Avenue, and also out here in the parking lot facing out there. So we're on track for that for next summer, and that's the plan. There were 4 other projects, all of which are complete. That's the kindergarten center compliance renovations. There's a new elevator in there, so it makes the building completely accessible. There are new toilet rooms in each of the classrooms. There are 8 classrooms in that building. Previously, only 5 of them had toilet rooms, so we've added 3. The nurse's office has a toilet room now. We ran into a couple obstacles there, but we got through them, and that was completed in time for the school opening. And it looks great, I must say. Similarly, at Lincoln, we added the 2 classrooms over the existing classrooms on the back, and that was done several months ago. But those the rooms were just put into service this year. So again, those look terrific. And it's a welcome addition to Lincoln School. Last summer, we did the Union classroom floor abatement. That was about, I believe, 12 classrooms. The flooring was completely replaced with asbestos abatement. That was done last summer in time for school to start. So that's old news. And finally, the science lab renovations. Those were also done last summer in time for the school opening last September. There was one exception there. The epoxy resin countertops were not ready, so we went with Formica temporarily then last year. This year we tacked that onto the Mortimer Wing project, so that work has been done. So those labs are completely done and the way they respect. So there too, they look terrific. So all 4 of those projects are complete at this point. I do want to acknowledge that the principals and the assistant principals have played an active role in managing the projects in their buildings and have been daily communication with the architects, the project managers, the contractors, and they really have bent over backwards to ensure that all have what they need to maintain progress. The technology department has been actively involved in all discussions and decisions regarding new technology. Mr. Paterno, our buildings and grounds director, has been a valuable partner throughout, offering his unique insights learned from 16 years experience with the district facilities. I would say that nobody in the district knows the facilities quite like he does. And finally, the maintenance staff, head custodians, custodial staff have all stepped up to make sure the contractors have access and resources they need, and that the buildings were ready for the school to open. I'll mention as well that we did have a surprise visit last week from Advocate. That's our consultant who keeps an eye on the custodial contract. They were very impressed at all schools. They came in and were delighted with what they saw. And in some cases, like the high school, the comment was they can't remember when they saw it look that good. So with all the work that went on in these buildings this summer, the custodians and the staff stepped up to make sure the buildings were ready for school to start. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Healy.
Question about the K Center. You have 2 additional items here. Is the sewer and mains, the replacement, is that scheduled, or I see
That's done.
retaining wall summer?
That was one of the obstacles we came across, was that there was problems with the sewer main going out to the street, out on Sylvan Street. So that was taken care of this summer.
Oh. And then the retaining wall was scheduled for this summer.
Correct. Yeah, the retaining wall in the back, if you look in the back of the building, you see the old wall and that walkway down toward Highland Cross. Still, it looks like hell, but we're going to get that done next summer, so that will
Thank you.
tidy that up quite a bit.
Good.
Okay. Anything else? Mrs. Jones?
One question, please. When you say that when we reach the money for the chain order allowance or close to it, and we'll need to supplement, where are we getting that money from?
Well, as you know, each of these, 6 of these 7 projects came in under budget.
Right.
So we do have funds available for that. So that's where it'll be coming from. But having said that, the projects that have been completed already, they did not use all of their allowance for changes. So, those funds are available too. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? Thank you. And again, I apologize about the video.
So, Mr. Kelly, on behalf of the Building and Grounds Committee and the board, I just want to continue to say thank you for really being on top of the facilities project from various angles, transparency with giving updates to the board, answering questions, follow-up that's needed at some of the committee meetings. So really, really appreciate all your work on this, above and beyond all the typical things happening in a year.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
So we are going to move on now to the report of the superintendent.
Thank you. Annually, I give to the board and the community the report of student achievement, and in your packet was that report. It's normally a rather voluminous report that goes on for quite a while, but this year, as we did not have state testing last year, we normally report on state testing grades 3 through 11 with comparisons and contrast to 3-year cycles. Not only did we not have tests last year to report, we didn't have tests the year before. However, there were some tests, and by code, I need to report them annually, so we're reporting them tonight. The first test is the Access for ELS, which is the summative assessment given to any student who's in the ELL, the English Language Learner Program. As you saw in your packet, there's different ranges of scoring from entering, emerging, developing, expanding, bridging, and reaching. So the entering and emerging are the lower level. Developing and expanding is when students are using both colloquial and academic language a little more freely. And bridging and reaching is when they're using them extensively with varying degrees between them. We had 36 students who participated in the program last year. and 12 or 33% of those students exited out, which meant they were able now to not receive the supplemental ESL instruction and just go into the classes without that support. And that is that's a good number. That's about the norm that where we hit most years. The scores ranging from the younger levels, where most of the students, we do get students at an older grade level that enter into the district or into the country, but most of the time they're in the younger grades. And if you look at the range, you'll see that the higher number of students who are entering or emerging on grade level are in the lower grades, and subsequently the ones in the expanding or bridging are generally in the older grade levels. But these scores are very consistent with what we've done in the past. The other test that was given last year, despite the pandemic and the various shutdowns, was the dynamic learning maps, DLM. Those tests are given to students who are the most significantly cognitively challenged students in the district, students who are in programs where they do not follow the traditional curriculum, but have tremendous modifications to the curriculum. That test was given to students similar to what was given in the past in when we had HESPA and NJ Ask and Park, not given every year, but given in grades 5, 8, and 11. And there were 15 students in the district who participated in that test. Some of those students are out-of-district students whose scores do report back to us. The magic number for the state is 20. If you're under 20, you can't publicly share or even privately share with the board. I mean, just confidentially share the results because the number is too small where it could identify a student. But we had 15 students take that test. Despite the fact, part of the report every year is to show interventions that are put in place if we find scores that are not up to the standard we would like. Despite the fact that we have not had testing for the last 2 years, we have been doing testing within district with Linkit and various benchmark assessments. And as you know, and as we discussed before, we now have provided access to IXL and Newsela, K to 12, where it used to be limited to a smaller number of grades. We have RAS Kids, which is a reading program primarily for students in the ESL program. We have added benchmark assessments, not only through Linkit, but through IXL in all grade levels. And again, we continue to modify our RTI, our response to intervention programs. This fall, students were given the Start Strong assessment. It was a very relatively short test, about 10 questions in language arts, math, and science. The purpose of that test, that assessment, was not to measure individual students or grade level achievement, but it was to provide data to both the student, the parent, and the teachers where students may have fallen short the year plus following some virtual learning and hybrid learning and the like. We do not have those scores yet because the testing window only ended about a week ago. But under, again, law and code, when I get the results, I will report back on those. But I want to stress the fact that this was not a test to measure academic growth for anyone. It was more of a diagnostic to see what may have been lost in terms of student achievement. There's a very quick turnaround on these tests. We've already gotten the preliminary scores on some of the tests that were given at the beginning of the window. So, to answer a potential question of if this is to give a diagnostic, how long do you wait for the scores? Not very long at all. In fact, I was hoping to have them all back so I could just do one report tonight. But we had a couple of makeups to give in some of the grade levels, which extended the window. Okay? And that test was essentially, if you were a fifth grader, it was looking at what should have been accomplished by the end of fourth grade to see where you're at. Okay. Also, every year in this report, I give a profile of the previous year class. So we had 175 graduates. Our graduation rate for the cohort was 96.1%. I want to remind you again, that is not the number of students who began senior year as a senior. where the graduation rate was probably more like 99%. It is the rate of the cohort that began 4 years previously. And that changed in the state accounting about 6 or 7 years ago. So if a student repeats a year because of an academic problem, repeats a year because of an attendance issue, whatever the case may be, they count in the cohort. If a student is in our 18 to 21 program where they do not graduate as per their IEP because their program is an extended program, they count in that cohort. So naturally the rate is a little lower, even though 96.1 is still a pretty good rate. It's a little lower than it would be if we were looking at students who are seniors the first day of school in September. The special education graduation rate, again, 81.8, but again, that's the cohort. And that includes those students who are in a plus 4 year program. And the non-special education rate was 98.1. Okay. Post-high school plans, 72% to 4-year colleges, 17% to 2-year colleges, about 89% total attending colleges, 1% going to a non-college post-education program, so about 90% for total further education, 9% employment, 1% military. The 90% education is a little lower than it's been in previous years. We're usually around 93 or 94. Anecdotally, we think some of that had to do with the pandemic. Some students were unsure about, is college going to be college again? I mean, we heard from a lot of our students last year who were very disappointed that, you know, they couldn't go away. They couldn't, or they went away and yet, you know, 80% of their classes were online. So I think we had some students who almost took that gap year, you know, to decide what to do. Again, not a major, you know, when you're talking about percents with 175 students, you're talking about maybe 2, 3, 4 kids different than previous years, but a little lower number. SAT and ACT test results, those are tests generally used for college admission. 90 students took the SAT last year. I'm going to comment on that in a minute. 52% of the class took the test, of class of 21. The mean score was 1150. The mean reading and writing score, 576. The mean math score, 574. All those numbers are slightly higher than previous years. College Board no longer gives you the comparison to state and national norms. ACT, 12 students took the test. That's an alternative college entrance test, about 6.8% of the class. And usually that number is low of ACT, of students who take it. The average composite score was 25.8. It's a different range of scoring. That's up to a little bit from where we're about 24. Okay. The number of students who took the SAT much lower than previous years, where you'd have 150, 160 students. The ACT is actually cut in half from previous years. More and more colleges and universities are no longer requiring SAT and ACT scores. So we're seeing both here and throughout the state and throughout the nation, those scores, those tests lowering a little bit in terms of number. It was also very hard to get testing centers last year. A lot of them were closed, tests were canceled. Oftentimes, you know, we're looking at the students in the class of 21 that took the test last year. A student may have taken the test in junior year, might have taken it again in previous years, but the combination of hard to get in to get the test and colleges not relying as much on it anymore may have lowered the number. Once again, we'll look to see and try to analyze if this trend continues. Certainly is not a lower number of our students going to college, where you have 90% going on and 50% took the test. So it's not an impact there. Advanced placement. Once again, we had a large number of students taking the test. We had 176 students taking AP tests, and those students took a total number of 312 exams. And over the last 5 years, that's pretty consistent with right about where the numbers are every year. We had 129 students with scores of not 170, not of tests, 129 students that are at least one test had a 3 or higher, which is 73%. We've been in the 70s and 80% percentages over the last 5 years, which every year has earned us accommodation from the College Board. I anticipate we'll get there again. I know 73% seems a little low compared to 84 the year before. Remember, different kids, different tests. But going back 10, 15 years ago, we'd be in the 40s and 50s in terms of percentage. Those numbers, you get above 50% of 3 or higher, which means you can earn credit. Those are very high numbers, especially in a year where students in the high school, some were remote and some were in a hybrid situation with shorter periods, less time in preparation for the AP exam. Students in New Jersey, in this part of the country, are always at a bit of a disadvantage with the AP exam, even though we have scored where we're in the level of accommodation every year. And the reason why they're at a little bit, because they put the test in early May, because in many parts of the country, school gets out at the end of May. So we're essentially at the beginning of the fourth quarter of the year when our students are taking the test that really is kind of a final for the course, which is why students in AP class have to do work over the summer in preparation for it, work a little harder. Teachers work a little harder to get them to the finish line a little bit earlier for that assessment. So we're very proud of our AP scores and how they reflect upon the entire district. And briefly, you may be aware of this. As you know, the high school graduation assessment, going back to the move from HESPA to PARC and then from PARC to NJSLA test, changed a bit where students had to pass a test, which they may have taken in 9th or 10th grade as their graduation exam. And if they didn't pass that test, there are other pathways they could go. And some of those pathways are listed in the packet, like they could score a certain score on the SAT exam, or they could take the PSAT and score a certain score, the AccuPlacer. There's a various number of tests they could take if they did not pass that NJSLA that was taken subject areas. For some kids, is algebra could be in 8th grade, okay, which is ludicrous if you think of it. Graduation could be test could be 8th grade. That's still in effect for the class of 2022. The state has changed the regulations for high school testing. There will no longer be tests grade 9, grade 10, grade 11. There'll just be a grade 11 test in language arts and math. It'll still be NJSLA, but it'll go back to the old days, which is 7 or 8 years ago and beyond, where the grade 11 test was your graduation test. Unlike the old days where if you failed that test, you had to retake it in this fall of your senior year, and if you didn't pass that, you had to go through a portfolio. All the pathways, all the other avenues, alternate types of assessments will still be in place. And then if that doesn't work, there is the portfolio appeal. And every year we have a handful or so of students who take the portfolio, have to take the portfolio, which is simply like it says, a portfolio of work in the subject area that gets reviewed by a reviewer of the state. So for the class of 23 going up to 25, they're only projected to change for that many years. These will be that will be the new graduation requirement, which means a little less testing, time and the energy that goes into that, which is not a bad thing, and a little more meaningful, I think, for the students. Often if a student, we've talked about this when we do the report of student achievement, student gets that ticket that that check box for the state, from the state level now is gone, right, for graduation. In grade 9 or 10, the motivation to sit through a 3-hour exam the following year may not necessarily be there, some students. So I think it'll give us a more meaningful test result too in grade 11. So that's the very abbreviated compared to other years. And if you've never heard the report of student achievement, you might think that was a pretty long report. Believe me, it's very abbreviated compared to what would be about a 45-page document when we have all the state testing. Okay. Any questions on that?
Jack, what grade level did the Start Strong assessment
It was,
get tested for?
good question. Let me just make sure I'm not misspeaking. Start Strong was given in grades 4 and through grade 12, 4 through 12.
Okay, so this year's grade 4 to grade 12.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, a couple of other quick things. As we mentioned, tonight would have been the Board of Ed Awards, but with the number of students receiving it, we're going to do it on 2 Wednesday nights, apart from a board meeting, November 10th, November 17th. Students who are receiving the awards and a parent will be invited, okay, it's invitation only. Dr. Alati will be there, along with me and Mr. Morano, Dr. Hopkins. Any board member who would like to attend, feel free to attend. It's not a meeting, so you'll just be in the audience, and we will acknowledge members of the board, maybe not by name, but members of the board, in terms of the award being in your name, and also if you're there, okay? So that's November 10th and 17th. On the agenda tonight, the CUSAC DPRs, the District Performance Report Reviews. As we talked about, I think at previous meetings, we are scheduled for a CUSAC visit on January 25th. We have to give the self-assessment into the state by November 15th. That's the day of our next board meeting, so we had to approve them tonight. Briefly, it's again a very large, for lack of a better word, audit of all the components that are in the school system, from the academic to the financial, to governance, to operations, to facilities, and a lot of evidence that has to be looked at, similar to an audit when the state folks come in. So we went through the preliminary review. We score out, very well, with one area of a 90% and other areas of 100%. The 90% area that includes test scores, and that part on test scores is going back to 2019 tests and 2018 tests in science, and they are populated by the state. So you can't really, there's that part we don't enter. In the last review 3 years ago, we hit that 100% in every category but one. So this is not a reach. This is kind of reality of where we're at, and we have the evidence to show it. But this is a self-assessment, and then the county and state comes in, and they give you their assessment. If you remember last time, it'll be a couple of months after the visit. Okay. Now, we were a high-performing district in the last report. Prior to 3 years ago, high-performing districts were given waivers. So we went about 9 years without having a visit. They then lifted the waiver for everybody. They came back in 3 years ago. We were high-performing again. And, there has been some discussion about, with COVID and the like, is there any return to the waivers for high-performing? To date, we haven't heard that. And with January coming, I don't know if that's going to happen. But regardless, we have to get the DPRs approved tonight so that we can submit them. Okay? And you're approving for their submission. There's a committee. Mrs. Jones is the board's representative on the committee. We met about, 2 weeks ago for several hours in the afternoon to review the work that we did to get those reports done, shared them with the committee. The committee is made up of board members and teachers and maintenance staff and some administrators, which is the mandate from CUSAC of how the committee, from the state of how the committee is set up. I think that is probably it. I do want to mention that there was one typo. If you look at it, if you're someone who pays attention to that on the monthly enrollment, the grand total on the bottom of 2609 is the correct grand total. There's a subtotal of 2610. The difference is one additional student was in the VOTEC column. So if you looked at that, it goes every month in your packet. The correct total is the 2609. And last thing I'll mention is that on Thursday night, I'm going to be doing a town meeting focusing. I'm going to present Joe's report for anybody who didn't see it tonight. Well, that means everybody. We didn't see it tonight, but anybody who didn't hear it tonight, hopefully will be able to see it on Thursday night. But the primary purpose of the meeting is to review the ESSER grant and also to see if there are any thoughts about the final ESSER grant, the American Recovery Plan, the ARP grant, that his application is due at the end of November. Okay? And that'll be 7 o'clock upstairs here in the auditorium. And that's it.
Is it Wednesday or Thursday night?
Thursday night. Announcement went out with the right date, the wrong day, and we corrected that. Okay? So it's Thursday night.
All right, any questions or comments for Mr. Hurley? Mr. Healy?
Kudos to the football program. Right, this Friday night is their
Right.
title game?
Yeah, we're having a good, we're having a good across the board athletic season in the high school. And the football team is playing for the league championship Friday night at home. I think it's a 6 o'clock start against Park Ridge. And then win or lose that game, they'll be in the state playoffs, which will be starting shortly thereafter. And I believe all of our fall teams have qualified for their respective state tournaments.
Other questions or comments? All right, hearing none, we're going to move on now to the report of the president. I was actually going to talk about athletics and just say I appreciated seeing everything that's happening and being able to go to all these games. I have a son who's in soccer, so don't want to forget about soccer. They're having a great season. And Mrs. Ahmed and I went a couple weeks ago to an RHS PTSA meeting. And at that meeting, I went as a parent of a 10th grader, and Mrs. Ahmed went as the liaison. And really, Mr. Morano talked a little bit about the opening of school. It was the first PTA meeting for the school year. And he talked about how it was one of the best openings he's seen in so many years, and the energy and the enthusiasm. And I don't know, outside of sleeping, when Mr. Morano takes a break, because it was like 8 p.m. and he was super excited. But I think it speaks to the energy and enthusiasm happening in schools, and it's great to see. I know when my 10th grade son comes home and I ask him, so how was school? He says, good. And for my 10th grade son to say good, that means really good. So I'm appreciative of that. I wanted to thank board members for the great work you're doing in committees. I know that oftentimes the public doesn't see and know all the things that the board does, but we have 6 different committees, and I know recently Buildings and Grounds, Finance, Strategic Planning met, and just the level of questioning and commentary and conversation and responsiveness and transparency by Mr. Hurley and Mr. Kelly. It's a great dialogue, and I think our role as a board is to make sure that the schools are well run, not to run them, but I think staying strategic, but also asking really good questions to understand things are moving in the right direction is super important. Last comment I was just going to make was board self-evaluations. You know who you are. 5 out of 9 are done. I gave you till this Friday, to have them done, so please submit them so we can have 9 for 9. And we will go over it during executive session of the November board meeting. If not, you're going to be stuck doing this in December. So I appreciate everyone's help with that. That's it for my report. Any questions or comments? Mr. Conti?
Yeah, I'd like to echo your sentiment about the PTA. I went to the Lincoln PTA meeting as the board liaison, and I was blown away by just the amount of work and enthusiasm that the PTA has engaged in, and how invaluable the services that they're providing are helping our schools, helping our teachers, helping our students. Truly amazing stuff that they were doing. I was expecting to hear about the things they were getting ready to do, and they'd already hit the ground running, hard and heavy. It was pretty impressive. So.
Thank you, Mr. Conti.
As
Mrs.
long as
Jones?
we're doing this now, I thought this was going to be under old business, and I went to the Washington School PTA meeting on October 7th. And like Mr. Conti, it says the enthusiasm was really great. They went over their budget. They must have had 30 members there, plus their executive board. It was a very fine meeting, and the energy is certainly there.
let me add one
Mr.
more.
Haley, yeah. Kindergarten.
Kinder Center, I went there the same night, October 7th, and the enthusiasm was high, and their participation this year is off the charts. They have a lot of members and so many activities right from the start. Yeah. Good to see.
Yeah, that's great to hear. All right, any other comments? Okay, then at 8:14 PM, we are going to open the meeting to the public for any agenda items, any items related to the agenda. Okay, hearing none, at 8:14 PM, we're going to close the meeting to the public, and we're going to move on to new business with action to be taken. We are going to start with personnel. Mrs. Ahmed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight, we're asked to go over 14 recommendations from the superintendent. Number one being to approve Angeline Graff for a social worker in the high school. Number two, Lisbeth Garcia. Would help if I put my glasses down. Oh, I have them on, I can't even see them. Fogging up. Approve Lisbeth Garcia as a long-term substitute STEM teacher at the high school. 3, Carol Drews as a long-term substitute computer and segregation teacher at Pierpont School. Glad to see her back again. 4, Victoria Lutz, a long-term substitute elementary teacher at Washington School. 5 and 6 are increase in hours for a head lunch monitor, Deborah Bristle. And 6 is for a lunch monitor at Lincoln School, Elaine Civic. 7, Caitlin Wojcik, disability leave. It's a, what do you call it, Family Leave Act. Number 8, Dana Roman, another leave pay for special education teacher at Pierpont School for maternity. 9, salary level changes for Lori Catalano, John Briganti, and Mary Olivo. 10, substitute teachers. For substitute teacher, according to law, Nithya Naranya, I'm sorry if I murdered that. And 11 also for her as a substitute teacher assistant. 12, travel reimbursements for Maria Goodman and Lynn Rosendwig. And 13 is Kelly Talty. I'm sorry, I said before it was 1 to 13, but 1 to 14 is only 13. So 13 is Kelly Talty, and she is at LDTC for the Rutherford School District in January 1st to start. So with the superintendent's presentation and the board's president, I'm sorry, I asked to move 1 to 14, 1 to 13. Oh my God.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Ahmed. Okay, so we're moving items 1 to 13 under personnel that were just discussed, and each one was named. So just ask board members if you can try to keep the mic close to you so the audience can hear. Any questions or comments about personnel? Dr. Racine?
Yep. What's an LDTC?
LTDC is a member of the Learning Disabled Teacher Consultant, is a member of a child study team. Child study team is made up of school psychologists, social workers, LTDCs.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? All right, Mrs. Ahmed has moved those. Do we have a second? All right, Mr. Healy. Any last comments or questions? Hearing none, Mr. Kelly, please take roll.
Mrs. Ahmed,
Yes.
Mr. Bogosian,
Yes.
Mr. Conti,
Yes.
Mr. Healy,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone,
Yes.
Dr. Racine,
Yes.
Mr. Sprayberry,
Yes.
Dr. Oladi.
Yes.
Motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to move on to curriculum and instruction. Ms. Jones.
Yes, thank you. We did not have the CNI meeting this month. Tonight, there are 11 resolutions under curriculum and instruction. Number 1, the NJ CUSAC 21-22 district performance review, which Mr. Hurley spoke about. Number 2, out-of-district placements, a list provided. 3, service providers. 4, field trips, and they're starting to accumulate. 5 is emergency bus evacuation drills. 6, 7, and 8 are 3 harassment, intimidation, and bullying decisions. 9 is school climate committee that has been appointed. 10, the PBSIS committee. Could you explain what that is?
Sure.
It's,
You want to go through everything and then
2
I'll...
parents are on it, and the last one is school improvement panel, which is teachers at Pierpont School. I'm sorry.
Okay. PBSIS is Positive Behavior Supports in School. It's a program out of Rutgers University. It's fun. We have it at Union School. We're in our 3rd or 4th year at Union School. It is funded by a grant from Rutgers. Rutgers provides the service. You apply for it, and they provide initiatives like the acronym stands for Positive Behavior in School. And Pierpont School has applied for the grant, and they received it. So we'll have now a program in Pierpont and Union. It is tied in with code of conduct. It's tied in with restorative practice. It's tied in with social emotional learning. It's tied in with all that. It's and it's a statewide program out of Rutgers University.
Positive commitment
Positive behavior support in schools.
support.
So if you walk through Union School and you see posters up and signs about, this is how you behave in the hallway, this is how you behave in the classroom, that's part of it. They have activities, celebrations, motivations for students who do certain things in terms of good citizenship, and they get certain perks with that. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of the program. I'm lost for what it is, but it's basically a class once or twice a month where students meet with a small group with a teacher to discuss, behavior in school. That's all part of PBSIS.
That's it for CNI.
Okay, other questions? Mr. Mazzone?
Yeah, could you just explain the role of the school climate committee and if we have them at all of our schools?
Every school is a code. You have to have a school climate committee at every school. It has to be made up. It's prescribed as to who has to be on it in terms of administrators, teachers, parents, so in terms of numbers, okay? It meets a couple of times a year. It used to be called the crisis team and things like that. It's expanded now to a little different attitude in terms of climate.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? All right, Ms. Jones, do you want to move those?
I move resolutions 1 through 11 under curriculum and instruction.
All right, do we have a second? Mr. Bogosian? Any last comments or questions? Hearing none, Mr. Kelly, please take roll.
Mrs. Ahmed,
Yes.
Mr. Bogosian,
Yes.
Mr. Conti,
Yes.
Mr. Healy,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone,
Yes.
Dr. Racine,
Yes.
Mr. Sprayberry,
Yes.
Dr. Oladi.
Yes,
Motion's carried. Thank you.
thank you. We're going to move on now to finance. Dr. Racine.
Good evening. We had a finance meeting last Monday. There were 4 items that were discussed. One is our current audit, which is ongoing. That happens every year. Our results should be given to us sometime between December 5th and February 5th. We have legislation changes. We'll go back to that. So then we discussed the 2021-2022 budget status. Right? Along with that, the Fund 30 status, which is the referendum money status. And then we went over the calendar for the next year's budget, the process. And besides that, now we have 5 items on the agenda. Number 1 is the approval of bills. Number 2 is the treasurer's report for September. 3 are the budget transfers. Number 4 is the resubmission of a school security grant. And number 5 is the ARP ESSER 3. It keeps getting bigger, right? Grant. So Mr. Kelly, can you please explain why we're resubmitting the grant? Sure, it's paperwork or something.
I wish I knew, to be honest.
Okay.
This was the direction from
Sorry.
the state. We had submitted it on
Okay.
time back in June, I think, it was fully approved, finally approved, and then the word came, do it again.
All right, so it's just
so I
send
did
again.
it again, so,
Okay. All right, so some minor issues, yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Cool. And that's
All
it.
right. Questions or comments from board members? Hearing none. Dr. Racine, you want to move those?
I'd like to move items 1 through 5 in finance.
All right. We have a second. Mr. Mazzone, any last questions or comments? Hearing none. Mr. Kelly, please take roll.
Mrs. Ahmed,
Yes.
Mr. Bogosian,
Yes.
Mr. Conti,
Yes.
Mr. Healy.
Yes.
Mrs. Jones.
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone.
Yes.
Dr. Racine,
Yes.
Mr. Sprayberry,
Yes.
Dr. Awadi.
Yes.
Motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on now to policy. Mr. Healy.
Yes, we did not have a committee meeting since our last board meeting. And tonight, there's one resolution with 14 policies and actions as listed. And it is a second reading for these, so we're moving them forward and looking for approval.
Okay. Any questions or comments from board members? We've already gone through these once. All right. Hearing none. Do you want to move this?
I'd like to move these, yes, this resolution.
All right. Do we have a second? Mr. Bogosian, any last comments or questions? Hearing none. Mr. Kelly.
Mrs. Ahmed,
Yes.
Mr. Bogosian,
Yes.
Mr. Conti,
Yes.
Mr. Healy,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones.
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone,
Yes.
Dr. Racine,
Yes.
Mr. Sprayberry,
Yes.
Dr. Awadi.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to move on now to buildings and grounds. Mr. Sprayberry.
Good evening. We've got 2 motions I'd like to move this evening, but before that, we did have a Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting this past week, and I'd like to point out a few things. Thank Mr. Kelly for his presentation. I know everybody couldn't see it, but the presentation that he gave was amazing. You know, really in depth and everything. And the one thing that was invaluable, I think Ms. Jones will agree, everybody was there, the video of the kids coming into Pierpont School and seeing their new gym and the excitement level of it was just, that made it all worth it. So, but, you know, I'd like to touch on the overall, the projects are still very under budget. You know, as you pointed out, they did come under budget on the bidding process. Industry delays, I mean, they're out there, they're everywhere. You know, we're seeing it, everybody's seeing it, you know, not just the schools, but the construction industry as a whole. But Epic, PSA, and everybody in the administration is really on top of all the projects, so thank you. Much appreciated. But we do have 2 motions. One is a 3-year maintenance plan for the schools required by the state of New Jersey. And we have 5 change orders, 2 at the high school, 1 at Pierpont, 2 at Union Middle, all standard change orders within that we've all known about and discussed. If there's anything else you'd like to add on those, Mr. Kelly?
If I may, the comprehensive maintenance plan, that is another state mandate. We do that every year. The point is, if I can feel that I actually understand the point, is to make sure that every school can see that they are spending at least as much as the state feels should be spent on maintaining the systems in the school buildings. The calculation that they gave us to do indicated that we should spend at least, I think it was about $117,000 in next year's budget. We're expecting to spend over $1 million. So we far surpassed that threshold, and honestly, I think probably every school district does. But that's really what it's doing, just making sure you see that you're spending what they feel is necessary.
Okay, great. All right, we'd like to move those 2 motions.
Okay. Any questions or comments from board members? Mr. Healy.
One question about the required maintenance. The Kindercenter budget, I believe the actual for 2021 included the roof, and now the projected budget and planned is a lot less. So is that the reason it went down?
No,
No?
no. The reports that you're looking at show what we could be spending money on over the next year. The roof is not included in that because that is not maintenance.
No,
That
what
was
I
a
meant,
capital
Mr.
project.
Kelly, was in the past budget. It was, the roof was included. Now, we don't have to do it, so the planned.
That's outside the scope of what this report is
Okay,
doing.
all right. So
That's
there's
a
other
capital
reasons.
project as opposed to a maintenance project.
Okay,
So, does that answer your question?
no.
No.
Let me try
So-
again.
So wait,
Let me
Mr.
just read this. The budget for 2021 was 79,000. The budget for 21-22 is going to be 33,000.
Now, that's really not the budget. That's the report. And Mr. Kelly, if I'm wrong, you could maybe third party, I could explain it better. The maintenance is not a roof. Roof is a capital project. So that would have no impact on that number.
I withdraw the roof.
Okay.
But the
Why is it
question
different?
Why is it down so much? Yeah. And is it?
Are you looking at
that's
the
what I
budget or are you
thought.
looking at last year's comprehensive maintenance plan?
The required maintenance. Yeah, required maintenance.
The same plan?
Yeah.
There are a lot of these required maintenance expenditures that are district-wide, so I allocate them between the different schools, so it may result in a difference from
They're not
one year to the
participating.
next.
Okay. I get you.
The majority of the expenditures are allocated. So if Sylvan, for example, had a large number last year, it's probably because they had a few actual expenses attributed to them as opposed to the allocation. But they did get a piece of the allocation based on square footage.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Other questions? Mr. Conti?
Yeah, can you explain the third change order? It's $0, right? We're just approving. I'm not quite sure I understand it. It's just a time thing that we're approving.
Yes, exactly. There's $0 impact on this. It's just to codify
Okay.
that this change has been approved by all parties and accepted.
Okay.
All right, other questions? Hearing none, Mr. Sprayberry moved those. Do we have a second? All right, Ms. Jones, any last comments or questions? Hearing none, Mr. Kelly, please take roll.
Mrs. Ahmed,
Yes.
Mr. Bogosian,
Yes.
Mr. Conti,
Yes.
Mr. Healy,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone,
Yes.
Dr. Racine,
Yes.
Mr. Sprayberry,
Yes.
Dr. Oladi.
Yes.
Motion's carried. Thank you.
All right, I want to thank all of the committee chairs for their reports. We did also have a strategic planning and communications meeting. I'd like to just briefly ask Mr. Mazzone, as the chair of that committee, if you want to give a brief report.
Certainly. Thank you, Dr. Lottie. So the committee met on Monday, October 11th. We had a brief meeting where we discussed 4 items. Those were the IT department's third quarter report, which was shared with the board. We briefly reviewed the demographic study. We did talk briefly about upcoming potential negotiations, REA starting. And last but not least, we talked about just some of the anticipated retirements in the district and some impacts on operations.
Yeah, Mr. Kelly?
Following that meeting, the committee asked me to reach out to the demographer to ask him to do
Correct.
a presentation. Well, I had thrown out a couple dates there. I haven't heard from everybody, from the members of the strategic planning committee, so you can get back to me and let me know which works best.
Sure.
It was November 30th or December 1st. I think I had, so far, everybody is pretty good with either, but thank you.
And just to clarify, the strategic planning committee looked at a demographic report about the student population and what it looks like in the longer strategic term. And so what we've asked for is someone who comes in and presents the data and lets us know as a board what we should be focusing on, what are the sort of important variables, because it is a over 50-page report. So we're going to have that presentation is forthcoming.
Can that report be shared with the whole board?
Yeah, I think the thing we want to find out is how to guide people to read it, because there's a lot of redundancy in the report, but there's also all the redundancy has a slightly different shade, so it'd be good just to get some clarity. Mr. Kelly and I looked at it. We have some questions about certain things and we can't answer. So I think it'd be good to get guidance. Keep in mind that the demographer that we used for years and years and years, decades, he passed away. He was a one-man business, so we had to reach out and get a new demographer. So it's a much more thorough report, but a very different approach. So we need some guidance. So once we have that meeting, I think then we would share it and share what we found out at the meeting. Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mazzone. We are going to move on now to old business. Is there any old business that board members would like to bring up? Mr. Sprayberry.
I'd like to take a moment and point out Rutherford High School had their open house last week, and to the horrification of the parents that were there, myself, Jen, Lynn, and I say that because we're not ready for high school yet, so we get ready to walk in, and but Mr. Morano, Ms. Ursulisi, Mr. Frazier, Ms. Leonard, and many others that we went through that orientation just blew it out of the water. I mean, if you went to that orientation, I sitting there and listened to Mr. Frazier, I was proud to be on this Board of Education. I was proud to be a member of the community. I was proud of the school district. Everything was sitting there and everything that was being said, and then as we lost the kids 3 times on the tour, I walked into the last one. Mr. Morano had to find me in the hallways and escort me over to the classroom, and I walked in front of the entire class in front of my son with the principal, and got scolded after we left the classroom. But if you look at Rutherford High School as a whole, what was presented, what was said, how it was presented, they just really blew it out of the water. And I just didn't want to leave this meeting without pointing that out. And I thank Mr. Morano that night as well for everything that he and his staff had did and pointed out. So it was just a phenomenal open house.
Thank you. Appreciate you sharing that. Other old business? Mrs. Ahmed?
I'd just like to bring up to the board members, I don't know which board members didn't finish it, but this evaluation took hours to do. I thought it was the longest evaluation I ever had in all the years. I mean, I was just like falling asleep already by the time you get to the end. I mean, hours. So, normally we wait to the last minute and we do it, and if you put a little time into it, you get it done. But this was really and very repetitive. So start on it tonight, guys.
Did you put that into the evaluation?
Yes, I did. I have never seen so many repetitive questions in my life.
Well, I didn't write it, so that's okay. That's good.
Oh, well.
Talk to those folks who wrote that.
I'll save my comments for another point. No, the board self-evaluation, we took it from NJSBA, and we tried to make it a little bit more efficient and actually a little bit more succinct than that one was, and also provide a couple of open-ended opportunities for board members to talk about what we should be doing as a board to grow and improve, and things we didn't feel that the survey had gotten to. So it is thorough. It does take time, so appreciate everyone taking the time to do that. Other old business. All right, we'll move on to legislative update. Ms. Jones.
Just one tonight. This is Senate Bill 84 and Assembly Bill 3149. This is an anti-hazing policy. Requires institutions of higher education and public and non-public high schools and middle schools to adopt anti-hazing policies, expands activities encompassing criminal hazing, and upgrades penalties for engaging in these activities. That's it. That's up and coming.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Jones. With that, at 8:37 p.m., we are going to open up the meeting to the public for items related to or not related to the agenda. We will ask people who would like to speak to come up to the microphone, give us your full name and address. We're required to have that. Mr. Kelly can record. Keep your comments to about 3 minutes. With that, we will open up the floor.
Good evening, Laura Furno, 326 West Passaic Avenue. I'm just here for a very simple ask. Washington School, where my son goes, they don't have any mask breaks, although he was very excited because he came home from school a few weeks ago, and he said they did get 3 mask breaks in gym. So I'm wondering if perhaps Washington, if we could consider letting them have mask breaks like some of the other schools. That's it. Thank you.
I'll let them know tomorrow. I'll see what's going on.
Okay, other comments?
Good evening, Kathleen Campbell, 25 Carlton Place. Principal Joan Carrion insists there is no opt-out provision for social emotional learning. She stated, and I quote, "Information about SEL instruction is embedded in various curricula. The curriculum is available on the district website and is updated as the Board of Ed approves each course. I have attached the SEL competencies that the NJDOE requires schools to infuse in their curriculum," end quote. This is not true. And I have provided documentation showing New Jersey does not require it. There is no mandate, nor does it impact high school graduation. Carrion advised that you, the board, approved SEL in August as a district goal and accepted a sizable federal grant for social emotional support and mental health. That goal states to, quote, "continue to build capacity of teachers and staff to integrate SEL at all grade levels. With the social isolation and anxiety that has grown with the pandemic, students and staff are increasingly in need of this support," end quote. My child, thank God, did not experience social isolation nor anxiety due to the pandemic. So who here assessed him and determined he needed SEL? Why are you assuming every child in this district is in need of this instruction? It should only be done by trained medical professionals on a case-by-case basis and not be placed on the shoulders of overextended and unlicensed teachers. If done improperly, there can be irreparable consequences because it tells children how they need to think and feel. School is no place to be implementing behavioral modification on our children. They are not your science project. They go to get an education, and you are stripping valuable core class time to provide activities that require our children write down their personal feelings, which should be reserved for a therapist. You also cited in the August meeting, quote, "research has documented the need for learning recovery in math, science, and ELA after the increasing gaps in learning due to the pandemic," end quote. So why are we taking valuable time away from these classes for SEL, which focuses on manipulating cognitive behavior and not on math, science, and ELA? No SEL curriculum can be found on the district website, as Principal Carrion has claimed more than once. I learned of SEL activities from reviewing the teachers' lessons plans. If it is being implemented in our core classes, how come our curriculum is not reflecting that? How come you're not forthcoming with parents about SEL being implemented in their children's classrooms at your requirement? We pride ourselves on receiving 2 communications awards for staff spotlight and referendum flyers. Maybe we can get a 3rd award for putting a spotlight on SEL in our district. You need to be more transparent, and the fact no one will show me the SEL curriculum is suspicious to myself and other parents. You need to let teachers go back to teaching and not conducting group therapy parents did not consent to. I just need like a couple seconds. Friday, my son was assigned an SEL activity in his math class on subject matter that had no relation to math. I emailed his teacher, the principal, and superintendent, advising them he was not to participate in that activity until we had resolved all of my concerns, which until today we still have not. Despite this, they went ahead and gave it to my child with complete disregard for my concerns and stripped me of my parental rights, which are natural and fundamental rights of a parent to direct the upbringing, education, and care of their child, which it appears you are attempting to strip from all of us. We are seeing this happen nationwide, but I will not accept it. Just because you have the, quote, expectation that children should participate in SEL, end quote, as said to me today by Superintendent Hurley, it does not mean they are legally required to participate. And you need to show us where it says that they are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other comments from members of the public?
Matria Fedorka, 84 East Van Ness. I would like to make you aware of issues we are having at Rutherford Elementary School. Teachers want to, quote, just teach, but are intentionally drawing attention to themselves and their agenda. Parents of at least one class are no longer being referred to as such because it is not inclusive enough. Parents and guardians are now being referred to as grown-ups in charge. Since when are the terms parent and guardian inappropriate? People that raise children are parenting them, no matter their blood relation. And if that's not inclusive enough, guardians should be. Using grown-ups in charge is disrespectful, demoralizing, and diminishes parental authority. By using grown-ups in charge in the classroom and addressing me as such, I am equal to anyone on the street, a bus driver, for example. My second grade child is being taught disrespect towards his parents, or at best, he's being taught that his parents' opinion and direction are equally as important as any other grown-up in charge. This is not acceptable, nor is it a teacher's job description. The English language has proper vocabulary for my position. Mom, mother, parent. I need to be referred as such. This is appropriate vocabulary. If we are so careful to use pronouns properly, we need to also use nouns properly. After all, teachers are supposed to be teaching vocabulary as well. Or has that gone out of fashion with spelling and cursive? My child needs to be taught proper English. Proper English, not creative English, should be the job of our school system. Dog mom. It's a bumper sticker you see on every single other car. Parents are referred to as grown-ups in charge, but dogs have human moms. Pathetic.
All right, thank you. Other comments from members of the public? Okay, hearing none. At 8:45 p.m., we're going to close the meeting to the public. And we do have a need for an executive session.
I'd like to just...
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Early, you want to...
Yeah, I'd like to clarify a few things about, to the last speaker and the first speaker. I'll follow up on your comments tomorrow with that school, okay? I'd like to just also clarify, as I will with the concern about the mask break. I want to clarify a few things about social emotional learning. Because I think it's probably something that people hear a term, may not know what the term is. So social emotional learning is basically a process where we all, adults, children, learn to apply certain knowledge and skills to things that are, making good decisions for ourselves, self-awareness, growth mindset, grit, determination. The DOE provides modules and competencies on that. They have, I think there's 5 of them: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills. When did this begin? It did not begin in August of this year. In fact, SLE, or competencies, have been a district goal or a school goal every year since 2017. It is not connected to the grant. The grant is totally different. The grant, I'll get to that in a moment. In each of those years, since 2017, there have been school goals, district goals, and if the word social emotional learning used in many of them, in some cases, there were things like growth mindset and words of that nature. In 2018 and 2017, they were major parts of our professional development at the opening of school. In 2019, it was the keynote address. Prior to 2017, social emotional learning was part of a program known as character education, and it lasted for probably 15 or 20 years with various grant monies coming in. And it was also known as emotional intelligence in the past. It was always part of education where the mission has been citizenship and things of that nature. The tenets were the same. Where the state, as I spoke today to the county educational specialist, Ms. Laura Peck, about this topic, just to confirm what I already knew, the state has certain requirements. It also has certain recommendations, and a district can establish requirements beyond what the state requires. For example, the state requires 120 credits to graduate high school. Rutherford School District requires 130. The state requires 3 years of math. The Rutherford School District requires 4 years of math. So the state requirements are always simply a minimum, not a maximum. In addition to that, there's a policy, 3310, and academic freedom, is the name of the policy, which says that topics that are not in the curriculum may be put into courses of study if they are in line with district goals. That's policy 3310. We did bring in through the grant a mental health person from Care Plus. Care Plus has had programs in schools in the state of New Jersey for probably 15 years. This clinician does not work with social emotional learning, does not work with classroom instruction, works with our student assistance counselors. In many ways is an additional student assistant counselor, not a medical person. They are either a trained social worker. And what they are able to provide are services that go beyond what our student assistant counselor can provide. So when we have a student with suicide ideation or aggressive behavior towards himself or someone else, we would have to get the parent and take that child to a hospital emergency room for a clearance. Now we can get the parent, and Care Plus is able to do that clearance on site. Care Plus is able to provide family therapy where needed, when in the past we'd have to say to a family, our student assistance counselors can't do that, but if you want, you could connect with Care Plus, or if you want, Care Plus could guide you to someone else. It's like adding a student assistance counselor that has absolutely nothing to do with social emotional learning. SEL is research-based. I mentioned Rutgers University before with PBSIS. We are working with CASEL. CASEL is a collaborative for academic, social, and emotional learning. It comes from Yale University. It began in 1994. And it works as a multidisciplinary approach. Multidisciplinary, which means it's infused into multiple disciplines with the connection that social and emotional competencies are a key to being better adjusted, better behavior, and also better academic performance. And that's through about 20 years of study from Yale University. CASEL's principles are the same as the state's in terms of those levels of self-awareness. We also are able to get Ramapo for Children in, and Ramapo for Children is a nonprofit organization that does a lot of training for special ed students along the terms of social emotional learning to understand how maybe they need to manage anxiety, manage stress, deal with emotions, deal with relationships, make decisions a little bit differently perhaps. The University of Michigan just came out with a study past pandemic that we're looking at that shows that states point blank the study of mindfulness needs to be embedded into classroom activities. And there's multitude of activities in the school, from things like taking a mental break, to doing yoga to relieve stress, to talking about what it means to be a good friend, to list positive. A lot of it is growth mindset, that if a student understands the positive things that they bring to the table, not just things that may be seen as negative. And these are done K through 12 and have been done K through 12. I'm going to say for the last 5 years, but quite frankly, when I was teaching in the 1980s, character education was part of the classroom procedure. And whereas, infusing things into the classroom, most of these activities take 5 to 10 minutes from a 50 or 60 or 70 or 80 minute block. If you've ever taught, you know that you can't be engaged in a single activity for 70 minutes, okay? And some of these breaks, not only are they good for the SEL component, but they're good just to break up the structure of the day. In speaking with County Educational Specialist Ms. Peck today, she reiterated what she has said before. The local districts have the ability to adopt beyond state requirements. Her words, not mine. Public education is not a buffet table that you pick and choose from. With the exceptions of family life, sex education, and dissection, it is a menu that is price fixed. You get the whole soup to dessert. So SEL is a very valuable program that I would venture to say, I don't know factually, but I would venture to say just about every school in the state embraces in one form or another. It's been with us for at least 5 or 6 years. It is not connected to any of the grant money. Those were things done to support mental health. The one connection is Castle, which we were able to bring professional development to go with the folks from Yale who originated this concept 30 plus years ago to get a little more in-depth training for our staff. So I just want to clarify, what it's about. And if we've done a poor job of identifying it, although I know it's talked about in buildings at back-to-school nights and letters and things like that, then we have to do a better job, I guess, of communicating it. But that's what it's about.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hurley. I want to thank everyone in the audience who took the time to participate and share their feedback with the board. We do take that seriously and do appreciate your time and being here. We are going to go into an executive session where we have
3 student issues and 1 contractual.
so 3 student issues and 1 contractual issue. We'll be out for about 15 to 20 minutes.
No action will be taken.
No action will be taken. Do I have a motion to go into executive session? Mr. Bogosian, seconded by Mr. Mazzone. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are going into executive session.